cocktail sessions, educational and inspirational talks from experienced startup founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders.
So my name's Tim Chi. I'm the CEO of WeddingWire. I actually wanted to start real quickly with a survey. So, and just by the looks, I think I know how this is going to turn already. Does anyone here have kids 3 to 6 years old? Can you raise your hands? I didn't think it would be too many. Okay, this joke's probably not going to work very well. I'll go with it anyway. So it's really interesting how kids are able to articulate things. So my daughter, Riley, she's 3.5 years old. Your typical 3.5-year-old doesn't do much, goes to school for half the day and then plays. I came home a couple weeks ago and I asked her, I said, Riley, how was your day? And she looked up at me. She said, Daddy, I had a good day. I got my computer, I did some work, and then I fought some monsters, and I had a pretty good day. How about you? And I said, that sounds just like my day, actually. It's really funny, right? Because I've been through, and I wanted to share with you guys today some experience about the two very different experiences that I've had, both at Blackboard and WeddingWire. But one of the core themes that runs through it is, you're always fighting monsters, whether you're in startup mode or you're a public company. And so I thought that what would work well for a format for this was I'll just sort of share my experiences. I have 4 things that I wanted to use as a framework when I reflect back on these 2 experiences, and I'll try and use a couple examples from the companies that I've worked with to illustrate. So just sort of cut to the chase at the very end. I'll name the 4 things first, and then we'll go through. So what I think is important when you're growing a company, for myself, and again, I try not to be preachy, so I'm going to do the shared experiences. Many of you may not agree. Many of you may be able to take some of this and leverage it. Either way, hopefully it's valuable to some of you. 4 things that I found really valuable. So the first, and Shane actually touched on this earlier, I think team. I've been really, really fortunate to work with really talented individuals at both Blackboard and WeddingWire. The second thing is listening carefully to their customer. I think we did that really well and continue to do that well at WeddingWire. The third actually is not being afraid to fail, and the fourth is just around timing. So let me start first with just give you background of the company. So Blackboard was started, it was actually a merger of 2 different companies in 1998. I was with one of the companies. We were seniors at university. I spent basically my entire senior year coding. And just so you know, I have no business coding whatsoever back then or today, yet I somehow found myself doing it, building the first versions of what would later become the first version of Blackboard that we brought to market. To give you the quick synopsis, it was a collection of scripts. And I should say, too, I've had 2 experiences. When I look back, and I wish my drivers were as rich and colorful as Shane's, but really both companies were started just out of sheer pain points that I experienced myself. So the first one, Blackboard, students at university, my friends and I, we were sick of walking across campus. We went to school in upstate New York. We were sick of walking across campus, turning in homeworks in the snow. So it was like, what can we do about this, and how can we leverage technology to solve that problem? Pain number 1. Pain number 2, as you would guess with WeddingWire, I was getting married at the time and thought that there must be a better way. So anyway, back to the Blackboard story. Met a bunch of guys my freshman year. We started a company our senior year together. It was a collection of basically scripts. Again, shouldn't have been programming, but did it anyway. Moved the company down to Washington, D.C. to merge with another company to form Blackboard Inc. Short version is that was 1998. We raised about $100 million in 5 years. Took the company public in 2004. I left in 2005, 2006 to start WeddingWire. The company actually, Blackboard, continues to be one of the largest e-learning companies, e-education companies in the world. It was just recently taken private again by a private equity firm, and still very close to all the guys over there. WeddingWire was started out of my living room in 2006. We had my wife and I had just moved back down from Boston after being away for 2 years. Started out of my living room. Today we're about 115, the number changes daily right now, 115 employees, 110, 115 employees, somewhere around there. We're based in Bethesda, Maryland. We're one of the largest wedding sites out there. We're actually coming up on our 5th year anniversary next week since we publicly launched. So So with that said, let me go and frame it and go talk about the four things that I mentioned. So first of all, team. Again, I have a really, really great experience working with two phenomenal teams. So the team at Blackboard, it was serendipity. The founding team that I was with, we're all hall mates in the same hall our freshman year, like the university had just placed us. And when you look back at it, it was really funny because we all majored in different things, and we all kind of all had like a mini company. We moved into the same house together off campus our sophomore year and stuck together our junior year, started the company, moved down to DC, and the rest is sort of history there. WeddingWire was a little bit different. As I was going through the process and Blackboard had gotten big and I wanted to leave and try startup again, I actually had a chance to piece together the team and surround myself with great talent because I need to. The COO, Lee, was an ex-Blackboard co-founder as well. I managed to convince him to come over and try this crazy idea. Sonny, our chief marketing officer, who's right here in the audience today, one of the best marketing guys in Washington, D.C. He was at business school, 1 year behind my wife. He left Harvard Business School and didn't return to run WeddingWire. And it was actually funny because and we should give him a round of, he just finished his degree 5 years later. I'm sure because his mom, I think he says his mom was like, you go finish your degree right now. He actually flew. It was amazing. He was running his team and flying back and forth between Boston, like to attend class. So Sonny there, our chief technology officer, was a friend that was dating one of my peers at Blackboard at the time too. So we're very, very fortunate to pull together an incredible team. I will say a couple things that I've learned too. So and you guys asked this question earlier, I think, and I agree with Sean. Team is definitely critical at an early phase. One of the things to look out for, though, and I don't hear this talked about that much, but alluded to, is what worked really well for me in both experiences was we all shared the same risk profile at that stage, right? So it was all college students, and then we had a bunch of single guys. I was the only one married, and it was like 4 guys starting a wedding company. One was married. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it didn't really matter. But nonetheless, we all should have shared the same risk profile. The second thing is alignment of incentives, right? So we were all very transparent up front about who owned what, and then the third thing, which we talked about earlier as well, was alignment of goals, and just ensuring that everyone was clear at all times around what each person's objectives were. And to this day, we will sit down and we will talk about it again. We'll check in and say, how's everyone feeling? What's going on? And I think that's actually been a really, really big boon. So I think point number 1 is definitely focus on your team. Try and find the right people. It's really, really valuable. The second thing was listening to your customer. So in the Blackboard case, when we first started selling, so Blackboard is an enterprise software company, but we weren't at the time. We were still trying to convince instructors, individual professors, and maybe a department chair to use our software. And frankly, we weren't again, I wasn't a coder. We weren't the best piece of software out on the block. There were actually ones that were written by professors at different universities. They were actually very, very good. But what we did really well was we responded very quickly to customers. I remember one night I was probably supposed to be in class, and I talked to some system administrator at University of Pittsburgh, and he's like, I'm using your software now, and all the faculty say they really want an online grade book. Like, students should be able to check their grade online. So I said, that's a really great idea. Let me take it back to the team and talk about it. Sat there, the guy, we coded it all night, called him back the next day, said, hey, guess what? You have your online grade book. Long story short, these are the guys, there was a couple of them that really, they were seen as technology leaders within the academic space. They became ambassadors for our brand, and we ended up winning just because of customer service. And so to this day, we brought a lot of these principles into the WeddingWire space, where we're trying to be very customer focused and customer centric. There's plenty of great literature out there. Tony Shea from Zappos has written a phenomenal book about corporate culture and customer service and customer loyalty. I would highly encourage you all to look at that. All right, the third thing is the fear of failure. So we weren't really afraid to fail. And I say this lightly because it's not like we were brash, but we were bold. And the difference is, in the way that I would characterize it is, when you think about both of these experiences, when I think about both of these experiences, I I connected personally with the pain, but I didn't have necessarily any industry expertise or skill in how to execute on them. But it turned out in the first case, and hopefully turns out in the second case, that it actually really doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, I would argue that the objectivity of not being entrenched in that space, not being forced to think a certain way or follow what competitors, actually was very, very helpful. So in the case of WeddingWire, we came in and we're like, we don't care how the competitors are pricing. Like that, they just do that. We don't know why they do that. So let's challenge every single assumption that happens, right? So we're always thinking about, well, why? Again, 4 guys in a wedding company, we weren't predisposed to think about anything in any particular way within weddings. But actually that allowed us to think a little bit more freely. Like the example that we use is we rolled into the market. So the way WeddingWire makes money is we sell to local vendors across the U.S. DJ down the street, photographers, videographers. They pay advertising dollars to be listed on our site. Now, the traditional media model was what we call pay to play, right? The rep calls up, do you want in or do you want out on this thing? And if you don't want to pay me any money, it's like the yellow pages. You don't need to be included. We actually went to market with freemium. So everybody gets on for free. Not only that, everyone can start managing their profile, can do all this stuff. And our reps come in and we actually try and help upgrade members, so we have a really, really wide base to pick up from. Again, not rocket science, but it just wasn't being done. And actually just being able to offer that value proposition early on really set us apart and helped us build a brand within the weddings and events space. And the last thing is just around timing. So, you can, for the Blackboard experience, like, you just, this isn't actionable, right? It sort of is there or it's not. Sometimes, and a lot of times timing can be everything. In the case of Blackboard, it was this late 90s. Universities had just spent millions of dollars wiring campuses. That was like the big thing in the late 90s, right? Port per pillow. Every single dorm room needs to have an Ethernet connection. And they also were spending tons of money on back office ERP systems, like to make sure that your ad drop worked and your bursar worked and that the academic staff was getting paid on time. And so we come in and we knock on doors and we're like, wait, hold on a second, let me get this straight. You just spent millions of dollars here wiring the campus. You spent millions of dollars on back office systems. And how much money are you spending on supporting your actual mission, which is teaching and learning and leveraging the infrastructure? And they were like, well, that's actually a good question. We said, well, we have a solution for you that actually works, right? It's about connecting faculty and students and administration together and making it better. That, I would contend that sort of time, that watershed moment, kind of only happened once in the education space, and we happened to be there at the right time. For WeddingWire, when we started the company, it's just dominated by media companies and had been for over a decade. And we said, how can a technology come in here and actually be disruptive and just change the way people view things? And there were a lot of people that tried. I think we just executed well, but we still continue to improve the way that we operate today. But you can't really always time things well. But and it really just gets down to a question of luck, right? So when I ask myself, was I lucky? I would say yes from a timing perspective. But I did actually hear a quote one time. Someone was saying, it's funny. The harder I work, the luckier I get. And I think there's actually an element of truth to that. So. I wanted to actually save time for Q&A because it seems like it was getting popular. Not everyone got a chance to answer questions. So I'll just sort of summarize with, I don't know, every day is a new adventure for me. Always new monsters to fight every single day. I do have to say, though, that, I feel really fortunate waking up every single morning, being able to get out of bed and, do what I really enjoy doing. And it's been an incredibly rewarding, aside from, marrying my wife and having my 2 kids, it's been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. And, hopefully as you guys, if you're in it right now, you're thinking about embarking on the mission, hopefully you'll find it to be the same way.